Chiron sat in silence for a long moment, staring at his screen. He did not know what to do. This was far beyond his training. He was just a patrol officer. He was not supposed to discover ancient alien signals. He thought about ignoring it. He could pretend he had never seen it. He could file a report and let someone else deal with it. That would be the safe thing to do. But Chiron was young, and the young are curious. He set a course for the signal's origin point and engaged his engines. The journey took several hours. Chiron spent the time reviewing everything he knew about humans. It was not much. He had learned about them in school like everyone else. They were one of the fallen species, the civilizations that had been destroyed before Chiron's people joined the Concord. The humans were famous because they had not just died. They had taken their enemy with them. The devouring swarm had been the most terrifying threat the galaxy had ever faced. For 10,000 years, it had moved from system to system, consuming every living thing it encountered. The Concord had lost battles against it. Some species had been completely wiped out. Everyone had believed that the swarm would eventually eat the entire galaxy. Then it reached humanity. The war lasted only 5 years. In those 5 years, the humans fought harder than any species had ever fought before. They did not just defend their worlds. They attacked. They pushed into swarm territory. They destroyed swarm bases. They hurt the swarm in ways no one had ever managed before. And then, at the end, they did something. The Prometheus Protocol. No one knew what it was. All anyone knew was that after the humans used it, the swarm disappeared. Every swarm creature in the galaxy simply stopped moving and died. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was gone in an instant. But so were the humans. Chiron's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the signal's origin point. He looked at his sensors and saw nothing. Just empty space. The signal was still broadcasting, but it seemed to come from nowhere. Then his ship's computer spoke. Warning! Gravitational anomaly detected. Large mass ahead. No visual confirmation. Chiron frowned. A large mass with no visual confirmation. That meant something was there, but he could not see it. That meant his blood went cold. The ship appeared slowly, like a creature rising from deep water. First, he saw the outline. Then the details became clear. A massive hull, black as the void itself, stretched across the space in front of him. It was larger than any ship Chiron had ever seen. Larger than any ship he had ever heard of. It was 20 kilometers long, at least. Maybe more. Strange symbols were painted on its hull. Chiron did not recognize the language, but he knew what it was. Human writing. The ship was dead. No light shone from its windows. No energy pulsed from its engines. It drifted slowly through space, tumbling gently end over end. It looked like it had been drifting for a very long time, but the signal was coming from inside it. Chiron's hand shook as he opened the communication channel. He did not know what to say. He did not even know if anyone could hear him. But he had to try. Unknown vessel, he said, his voice trembling. This is Patrol Officer Chiron of the Galactic Concord. Please respond. Silence. Unknown vessel, this is Patrol Officer Chiron. I am detecting a signal from your location. Please respond. More silence. Chiron was about to give up when he saw something that made his heart stop completely. A light appeared on the ship's hull. Just one light. A tiny point of brightness in the darkness. Then another light appeared. Then another. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The ship was waking up. Chiron watched in frozen terror as the ancient vessel came to life. Light spread across its hull like fire across dry grass. Its engines, massive things larger than Chiron's entire ship, began to glow with strange blue light. Power readings flooded his sensors, reading so high that his computer could not process them. And then the signal changed. The old, weak transmission that had led him here suddenly became something else. It became stronger, clearer. It became a voice. "Galactic Concord vessel," the voice said. It was calm, patient, human. "You are in proximity to a Terran reclamation ship. State your intentions." Chiron could not speak. He could not move. He could only stare at the massive black ship as it turned slowly in space, its dead eyes now burning with light, its silent voice now speaking after 20,000 years. The ghost had awakened. And somewhere, far away in the Concord capital, Counselor Vathra suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. She stopped walking and looked out the window at the stars. Something had changed. She could feel it in her bones. She did not know what was coming, but she knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence was over. Humanity had returned. The great hall of the Galactic Concord was filled with silence. 10,000 diplomats from 1,000 different worlds stood together in the darkness. Their eyes, some with many pupils and some with none at all, looked up at the ceiling where holographic stars turned slowly above their heads. Counselor Vathra stood among them. She was old, even by the standards of her people, the Kelani. Her pale blue skin had faded to almost white over the centuries. Her forearms hung loosely at her sides. She had lived for over 21,000 years, and she remembered things that most beings in this hall had only read about in history books. Today was the day of remembrance. The 20,000th anniversary of humanity's death. A deep voice echoed through the hall. It belonged to High Speaker Morvath, a massive creature covered in thick gray plates. He stood at the center of the hall, his words translated into 10,000 languages through the neural links that every diplomat wore. "We gathered today to remember the humans," Morvath said. "A young species. A brave species. A species that gave everything so that we might live." Vathra closed her eyes. The words felt hollow to her. They had felt hollow for 20,000 years. The holographic display above them changed. The stars disappeared, and in their place appeared images of Earth, blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. It was beautiful. Vathra had seen Earth once, long ago, when humans still walked upon it. She remembered their strange faces, their 2 arms, their soft skin. She remembered how they laughed. Now Earth was silent. The whole solar system was silent. No signals came from it. No ships left it. Every probe the Concord sent into human space never returned. For 20,000 years, the region around Earth had been marked on every star map with a single word: dead. The humans fought the devouring swarm alone, Morvath continued. They faced an enemy that had destroyed 200 civilizations before them. They asked for our help. We could not give it. That was the lie they told. We could not give it. Vathra knew the truth. The Concord had chosen not to help. The military leaders had calculated that humanity would lose. They decided it was better to let the humans die fighting than to waste Concord ships in a hopeless war. Vathra had been a junior counselor back then. She had argued against the decision. She had begged her superiors to send help. They had refused. And so she had watched from far away as humanity fought and died alone. The hologram showed images of the war. Human warships burning in the darkness of space. Human soldiers fighting on the surfaces of 100 worlds. Human cities in flames. And everywhere, the swarm. Billions of twisted creatures that moved like shadows and ate everything in their path. They were not truly alive. They were something worse. They were hunger given form. In the end, Morvath said, the humans deployed something they called the Prometheus Protocol. We do not know what it was. We only know that after they used it, the swarm vanished. And so did humanity. The hall fell silent again. Vathra opened her eyes and looked at the faces around her. Some showed sadness. Some showed respect. But most showed nothing at all. To them, humanity was just a story, a legend from long ago. They had never known a human. They had never heard a human voice or touched a human hand. But Vathra remembered. She remembered a human ambassador named David Chun. He had come to the Concord begging for help. He had shown them images of the swarm destroying human colonies. He had described the millions of people dying every day. He had asked, with tears in his strained round eyes, for the Concord to send ships. The Concord had said no. Vathra remembered the look on David Chen's face when he received the answer. It was not anger. It was not hatred. It was something worse. It was understanding. He had known, in that moment, that his people would die alone. "We will remember," he had said to Vathra in private after the meeting. "If any of us survive, we will remember what you chose today." Then he had left. His ship had jumped into hyperspace and disappeared. Vathra never saw him again. The memorial ceremony continued. Speakers from different species came forward to say words of praise for the dead humans. They called them heroes. They called them saviors. They called them legends. They did not call them victims. They did not call them abandoned. They did not call them betrayed. After the ceremony ended, Vathra walked alone through the corridors of the Concord station. Her feet made soft sounds on the metal floor. Through the windows, she could see the stars shining in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, far beyond her sight, was Earth, silent, empty, dead. Or so everyone believed. But there were stories. There were always stories. Spacers who traveled the dark edges of the galaxy told tales of a ghost ship. They said it appeared without warning in the emptiest regions of space. A massive black vessel, larger than anything the Concord had ever built. It had no power signatures. It had no life signs. It simply drifted through the void like a dead thing. But sometimes, the spacers said, it moved. Sometimes it appeared in one place and then vanished, only to appear light years away moments later. Sometimes it broadcast signals. Strange signals in a language that no one could understand. The spacers called it the Revenant. According to the legends, the Revenant was the last human warship. It was the final vessel of the human fleet, somehow still drifting through space after 20,000 years. Some said it was piloted by ghosts. Some said it was controlled by a mad artificial intelligence. Some said it was filled with sleeping humans, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Most people thought the stories were just stories. Space was full of strange things. Spacers were known to drink too much and imagine too much. The Revenant was probably just a myth, a legend born from guilt and wishful thinking. But Vathra was not so sure. She had studied the reports carefully over the centuries. The descriptions were too similar, too specific. Different spacers from different species in different parts of the galaxy all described the same ship. The same black hull. The same massive size. The same phantom signals. Something was out there. She just did not know what. Far away from the Concord capital, in a remote corner of the galaxy, a young officer named Chiron sat alone in his patrol ship. He was a Vethrani, a species known for their excellent eyesight and quick reflexes. His scales were dark green, and his eyes were large and golden. He was barely 30 years old, which made him very young by galactic standards. Chiron's job was simple and boring. He flew his small ship along the edges of Concord space, watching for pirates and smugglers. Nothing ever happened. The frontier was quiet. Days passed, then weeks, then months. And Chiron saw nothing but empty space and distant stars. He was thinking about asking for a transfer to somewhere More exciting when his sensors detected something strange. At first, he thought it was a glitch. The reading made no sense. His instruments were picking up a signal, but the signal was coming from nowhere. There was no ship in that location. There was no station. There was nothing but empty space. Chiron adjusted his sensors and looked again. The signal was still there. It was weak, barely detectable, but it was real. And it was old. Very old. The patterns matched nothing in the Concord database. Then his computer found a match. The signal was human. Kyren felt his heart stop. That was impossible. Humans had been extinct for 20,000 years. There were no human signals anymore. There were no human ships. There was no human anything, but the computer was certain. The signal matched pre-extinction human communication protocols. It was genuine. Vathra stood in the memorial hall of the Revenant, and she could not stop the tears from falling. The walls were covered with names, millions of names, each one carved into black stone that lined every surface of the massive chamber. Some of the names were old, written in scripts that had been used 20,000 years ago. Some were newer, written in the language that humans use now. Every name was a person who had died fighting the swarm. Captain Okonkwo stood beside her in silence. She did not try to comfort Vathra. She did not offer soft words or gentle touches. She simply waited, letting the old counselor absorb the weight of what she was seeing. "How many?" Vathra finally whispered. "We stopped counting after the first 5,000 years, Okonkwo said. The numbers became too large, too painful. Now we simply remember that they died. We do not try to count them. This is just one ship. Yes, there are memorial halls like this on every ship in the fleet. And in the prison dimension, there are monuments larger than mountains, fields of graves that stretch beyond the horizon." Vathra reached out and touched one of the names. The stone was cold under her fingers. The name was written in the old script. It belonged to someone who had died 20,000 years ago, fighting in a war that no one in the galaxy even knew about. "Tell me everything," Vathra said. "I need to understand. I need to know what humanity sacrificed for us." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Then come with me. I will show you our history." They walked through the ship to another chamber. This one was filled with holographic displays and ancient artifacts. Weapons hung on the walls. Uniforms were displayed in glass cases. Faded photographs showed faces of humans who had lived and died long ago. "This is our museum," Okonkwo said. "We built it so that we would never forget who we were and why we fought." She activated a display. The room filled with light, and suddenly Vathra found herself standing in the middle of a battle. Holographic ships flew around her. Human warships clashed with swarm vessels in the darkness of space. Explosions bloomed like flowers. Debris scattered in all directions. "This was the Battle of Earth's Gate," Okonkwo said. "The final battle before we activated the Prometheus Protocol. The swarm had gathered every ship it had. They came to destroy Earth once and for all. We met them with everything we had left." Vathra watched the battle unfold. She saw human ships ramming into swarm vessels. She saw fighters diving into the mouths of massive swarm creatures. She saw explosions that lit up the darkness like new stars. "We lost 60% of our fleet in 2 hours," Okonkwo continued. "But we held the line. We gave our scientists enough time to activate the protocol. The hologram changed. Now it showed something different. A massive device, built in orbit around Earth. It pulsed with strange energy that hurt to look at even in holographic form. The protocol opened a door to a place outside of normal space," Okonkwo explained. "A pocket dimension. A cage. We had designed it to trap the swarm forever. But there was a problem." "What problem?" "The door only stayed open for a short time. We could push the swarm through it, but we could not close it from the outside. Someone had to go in with them. Someone had to seal the door from the inside. Vathra understood. You went in, all of you, most of us. Okonkwo's voice was heavy. Some ships stayed behind to watch the galaxy. The rest of us followed the swarm into the prison. We knew we might never come back. We knew we were condemning ourselves to an eternal war. But it was the only way. The hologram showed the human fleet flying into the dimensional doorway. Thousands of ships, carrying millions of people, vanishing into a realm of darkness and chaos. For 20,000 years, Okonkwo said, we have fought in that place. The swarm does not sleep. It does not rest. It rebuilds itself constantly. Every time we kill one creature, 2 more appear. Every time we destroy one ship, 3 more are born. How did you survive? We adapted. Okonkwo touched the display. It showed images of human soldiers fighting in impossible conditions. They wore strange armor that glowed with energy. They carried weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. We learned how to live in the prison dimension. We built cities there. We raised children. We created a civilization in hell. The images changed again. Now they showed those cities. Strange structures made of metal and light, floating in the void between dimensions. Gardens grew under artificial suns. Children played in parks that existed outside of normal space. We never forgot why we were there, Okonkwo said. Every child was taught the story of Earth. Every soldier knew that they were fighting to protect the galaxy that had abandoned us. Some of them hated the Concord for what it did, but most of them understood that hate was useless. The only thing that mattered was winning the war. Vathra could not speak. The scale of the sacrifice was beyond anything she could comprehend. 20,000 years of endless battle. Generations of children born into war. Entire lives lived and lost in a dimension of darkness, fighting an enemy that never stopped coming. Why didn't you ask for help? She finally asked. Why didn't you send a message to the Concord? Okonkwo laughed. It was not a happy sound. We did. In the early years, we sent dozens of messages. We begged for reinforcements. We asked for supplies. We pleaded for any kind of assistance. The Concord never received those messages. I know. We discovered later that our signals could not escape the prison dimension properly. They arrived as garbled static, meaningless noise. After a while, we stopped trying. We realized that we were alone. I am sorry. You keep saying that. Okonkwo looked at her with tired eyes. I believe you mean it. But sorry does not bring back the dead. Sorry does not heal 20,000 years of pain. Then what can I do? What can the Concord do to make this right? Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. She walked to a display case and looked at the artifacts inside. Old dog tags, a child's toy, a wedding ring worn thin by time. My great-great-grandmother wore this ring, she said softly. She married my great-great-grandfather 3 days before they entered the prison dimension. They knew they would probably die. They wanted to be together anyway. She turned back to Vathra. You cannot undo what was done, but you can choose what happens next. The Concord abandoned us once. It could choose differently now. Not because it owes us, but because it is the right thing to do. We will help you, Vathra said. Whatever you need. The Concord will provide it. That is what I hoped you would say? Okonkwo's expression became serious. Because we need your help very soon. The threat you mentioned. The thing that created the swarm. Yes. Okonkwo activated another display. This one showed something different. Something that made Vathra's blood freeze in her veins. It was an image of darkness. Pure, absolute darkness. But within the darkness, something moved. Something vast and terrible and utterly alien. It had no shape that Vathra could recognize. It was not a creature. It was not a machine. It was something else entirely. We call it the silence between stars, Okonkwo said. We first detected it 500 years ago during one of our scouting missions in the prison dimension. We thought it was a natural phenomenon at first. A dark region where nothing existed. What is it? Chiron's hands trembled as he gripped the controls of his small patrol ship. The massive black vessel hung in space before him, its lights burning bright after 20,000 years of darkness. He could not breathe. He could not think. He could only stare. "Galactic Concord vessel," the human voice repeated. "State your intentions." Chiron opened his mouth, but no words came out. What was he supposed to say? He was a junior patrol officer. He was trained to catch smugglers and write reports. He was not trained for this. No one was trained for this. He finally managed. "I am Patrol Officer Chiron. I detected your signal. I came to investigate." There was a pause. Chiron counted his heartbeats. 1, 2, 4. "Patrol Officer Chiron," the voice said. "You are the first Concord citizen to make contact with the Terran Reclamation Fleet in 20,000 years. Please hold your position. Do not attempt to flee. A shuttle will arrive shortly." Then the voice went silent. Kyren sat alone in his ship, surrounded by the darkness of space, waiting for something he could not understand. Part of him wanted to run. Part of him wanted to activate his jump drive and disappear into hyperspace. But he did not move. He could not move. He was frozen in place, watching the impossible happen before his eyes. Minutes passed. Then a small craft emerged from the massive ship. It was sleek and dark, shaped like a blade cutting through water. It moved with perfect silence, approaching Chiron's patrol ship with careful precision. It stopped beside him. A light blinked on its hull. "Patrol Officer Chiron," a new voice said. This one was different, softer, female. "I am Captain Mira Okanku of the UAN Revenant. Do I have permission to board your vessel?" Chiron did not know what else to do. He said yes. The airlock opened, and Chiron saw a human for the first time in his life. She was smaller than he expected. Humans have been described as average-sized creatures, but Captain Okanko seemed small compared to the massive thing her ship represented. Her skin was dark brown, the color of rich soil. Her hair was black and cut short. Her eyes were warm and tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and still kept going. She wore a uniform that Chiron did not recognize. Black fabric with silver symbols. On her chest was a patch showing Earth surrounded by stars. On her shoulder was another patch showing a ship wreathed in flames. "You found us," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. Kyren did not know what to say. You're human." "Yes, humans are extinct." Captain Okonkwo smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that held more pain than joy. "That is what we wanted you to believe." The news spread faster than light itself. Within hours, every government in the Galactic Concord knew about the signal. Within days, they knew about the ship. Within weeks, they knew that humanity was not dead. The Concord capital descended into chaos. Councillor Vaithra watched the emergency session from her seat in the Great Hall. Thousands of diplomats shouted at each other in hundreds of languages. Fear and confusion filled the air like smoke from a fire. "This must be a trick," one diplomat screamed. "Some kind of weapon. A plague ship designed to destroy us." "Perhaps they are clones," another suggested. "Or artificial beings made to look human." "We should destroy the ship immediately," a military commander demanded. "Before they attack." Vaithra said nothing. She sat in silence, watching and listening. Her old heart beat slowly in her chest. She had waited 20,000 years for this moment. She had always known, deep in her soul, that the story was not over. The high speaker called for order. Slowly, the hall fell quiet. "We have received a request from the human vessel," he announced. "They wish to send a diplomatic party to the Concord capital. They wish to talk." More shouting erupted. Some demanded that the request be denied. Others argued that it should be accepted. Others called for immediate military action. Finally, a vote was taken. The diplomats would be allowed to come, but a massive fleet would be sent to the frontier first, to surround the human ship and ensure that it was not a threat. Vithra volunteered to lead the diplomatic mission. No one objected. She was the oldest member of the Concord. She was the only one who had met a human before. She was the logical choice, but the truth was simpler. She needed to see for herself. She needed to know if the guilt she had carried for 20,000 years could finally be laid to rest. The Concord fleet arrived at the frontier system 10 days later. 200 warships, the largest and most powerful vessels in the galaxy, arranged themselves in a sphere around the location of the human signal. Vithra watched from the bridge of the flagship as they dropped out of hyperspace. The Revenant was waiting for them. It was larger than any of them had imagined. 20 kilometers of black metal and ancient weapons, drifting in space like a sleeping giant. Beside the Concord warships, it looked like a mountain next to pebbles. Admiral Sothron, the commander of the fleet, stood beside Vithra. He was a Corthony, a species known for their aggressive nature and military skill. His gray skin was covered in ritual scars. His eyes were hard as stone. "One ship," he said quietly. "If it is truly alone, we can destroy it." "We are not here to destroy," Vithra reminded him. "We are here to talk." Sothron made a sound of disgust. "They hid from us for 20,000 years. They let us believe they were dead. What kind of species does that?" "A species that has good reason not to trust us," Vithra said. Before Sothron could respond, the communication console lit up. A face appeared on the VIEWSCREN. Captain Myra Okonkwo looked exactly as Chiron had described. She stood on the bridge of the Revenant, surrounded by other humans. Some were young, some were old. All of them wore the same black uniforms with the same silver symbols. "Galactic Concord Fleet," Okonkwo said. "Welcome. We have been expecting you." Admiral Sothron stepped forward. "Human vessel. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with force." Okonkwo did not react. She simply tilted her head slightly, as if she found the threat amusing. "Admiral," she said, "with respect, that would not be wise. Is that a threat?" "No, it is a fact." Okonkwo touched a control panel beside her. "Look at your sensors, Admiral. Look carefully." Sothron frowned and turned to his sensor officer. The officer's face went pale, then white. Then he looked like he might faint. "Admiral," the officer whispered. There are more of them." "What do you mean?" "Ships, Admiral. Human ships. They are everywhere." Vithra felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the view screen as new signals appeared. First one, then 10, then 100, then more than she could count. All around the Concord fleet, ships were appearing from nothing. They emerged from invisibility like predators rising from tall grass. Massive warships, each one as large as the Revenant. Smaller cruisers, fast and deadly. Carriers filled with thousands of smaller craft. An entire armada surrounding the Concord fleet from every direction. 200 Concord ships, and at least 500 human vessels. Admiral Sothron's face turned gray. His hands clenched at his sides. He had been ready to give orders to attack. Now he realized that those orders would have killed them all. "You see," Okonkwo said calmly, "we are not your enemies, Admiral. If we were, you would already be dead. We have been watching your fleet since it left the Concord capital. We let you come here because we wanted to talk, not because we could not stop you. Vathra stepped forward. Captain Okonkwo. My name is Counselor Vathra. I was present at the Concord when humanity first asked for help against the swarm. I voted to send aid. I was overruled. Something flickered in Okonkwo's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or something older. I know who you are, Counselor, she said. Your name is in our records. You were one of the few who spoke for us. May I come aboard your ship? Vathra asked. May I speak with you in person? There was a long pause. Okonkwo looked at someone off-screen, then nodded. You may, Counselor. You and 2 others. But the Admiral stays on his ship. Southron started to protest, but Vathra silenced him with a look. Agreed, she said. I will bring only observers. I wish only to understand. Then come, Okonkwo said. It is time you learned what happened to humanity. The shuttle docked with the Revenant an hour later. Vathra stepped through the airlock and found herself in a world she had never imagined. The interior of the Revenant was not cold or dark, as she had expected. It was warm and filled with life. The corridors were wide and clean. Plants grew in special containers along the walls, their green leaves reaching toward artificial sunlight. Humans walked past her, nodding respectfully. Children ran by, laughing and playing. Children. There were children on this ship. Captain Okonkwo met her at the airlock. Up close, she was even more impressive. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death many times and no longer feared it. Welcome to the Revenant, Counselor, she said. Please follow me. They walked through the ship. Vathra saw living quarters and dining halls and training rooms. She saw humans exercising and studying and working. She saw families eating together. She saw old men and women sitting in gardens, talking quietly. It was not a warship. It was a city. A floating city in space, carrying thousands of human souls. I do not understand, Vathra said. The Revenant was supposed to be a ghost. A dead ship drifting through space. That is what we wanted you to think, Okonkwo said. We showed ourselves only when we needed to check on the galaxy. When we saw your ships or your stations, we vanished again. We became the ghost stories that spacers told in bars. But why? Why hide for so long? Okonkwo stopped walking. She turned to face Vathra, and her eyes were filled with something ancient and heavy. Because we needed time, she said. Time to finish what we started. Time to make sure the galaxy was safe. Time to decide if we should return at all. Decide? What do you mean? Okonkwo was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. Come with me, Counselor. There is something you need to see. She led Vathra to a large room at the center of the ship. The room was dark, except for a single holographic display in the middle. The display showed a map of the galaxy, but it was different from any map Vathra had seen before. Some regions were marked in green. Those were Concord territories, safe zones, civilized space. But most of the map was marked in red. This is what the galaxy looked like 20,000 years ago, Okonkwo said. The green areas were controlled by the Concord. The red areas were swarm territory. Vathra stared at the map. The red covered almost everything. Earth was a tiny point of green, almost invisible, surrounded by an ocean of crimson. The swarm was winning, Okonkwo continued. In another century, it would have consumed everything. The Concord, Earth, all of it. Nothing would have survived. We know this, Vathra said. The histories tell us that humanity stopped the swarm. The histories tell you part of the truth. Okonkwo touched the display. The map changed. The red areas began to shrink. They pulled back from Concord space. They retreated toward a single point. We did not destroy the swarm, Okonkwo said. We trapped it. The Prometheus Protocol opened a doorway to a place outside normal space. A pocket dimension. A prison. We lured the swarm inside, and then we followed. Vathra felt cold. You followed? You went into the prison with them? Yes. Okonkwo's voice was flat, empty. Someone had to make sure they never got out. Someone had to fight them forever in the darkness between dimensions, where no one could see and no one could help. The map changed again. Now it showed the pocket dimension. It was small and cramped and filled with red. For 20,000 years, Okonkwo said, humanity has been at war. Not here, in normal space. There, in the prison we built. Generations of humans have been born and have died fighting the swarm. My grandmother fought in that war. My mother died in it. I grew up watching my friends die in battles that no one would ever know about. Vathra could not speak. She could only listen in horror. The ships you see here, the Revenant and the others, are Watcher ships. We slip back into normal space sometimes to check on the galaxy, to make sure the Concorde is safe, to make sure no other threats have appeared. Then we go back into the prison and continue fighting. Why? Vathra finally managed to ask. Why would you do this? The Concorde abandoned you. We left you to die. Why would you protect us? Okonkwo looked at her. For a moment, her mask slipped. Vathra saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. The grief. The endless, impossible weight of 20,000 years. Because someone had to, Okonkwo said. Because the swarm would have eaten everything. Because we were the only ones stubborn enough to try. She paused. And because we remembered what the galaxy could be. The good parts. The music and the art and the children laughing. We fought to protect that. Not the Concorde as a government, but life itself. Vathra felt tears rolling down her face. She did not try to stop them. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry for what we did. Okonkwo nodded slowly. I know you are a counselor. But there will be time for apologies later. Right now, we have more important things to discuss. More important? Yes. Okonkwo's face became serious. The swarm is nearly finished. We have almost won the war in the prison. But during our long fight, we discovered something. The swarm was not the greatest threat to this galaxy. What do you mean? Okonkwo touched the display one more time. The map disappeared. In its place appeared an image of something vast and dark and terrible. Something that made Vathra's blood turn to ice. The swarm was a weapon, Okonkwo said. A tool created by something else. Something older. Something worse. And it is coming. She looked at Vathra with eyes that held 20,000 years of war. Humanity has returned, counselor. Not for revenge. Not for reward. We have returned because the galaxy needs us again. Outside the Revenant, the human fleet hung silent in space. 500 ships. Weapons hardened by 20 millennia of endless battle. Crews who had never known peace. They had come home. And the real war was just beginning. We do not know exactly, but we believe it is a being. An entity that exists outside of normal reality. It is older than the galaxy, perhaps older than the universe itself. And the swarm was its creation. Vathra stared at the image. The darkness seemed to stare back. The swarm was a tool, Okonkwo continued. A weapon designed to consume intelligent life and feed it to the silence. Every species that the swarm destroyed, every planet that it consumed, was fuel for this thing. It has been feeding for millions of years. And now it knows that its weapon failed. Yes, the swarm has been trapped for 20,000 years. The silence has been waiting for it to finish its work. Now it is coming to see why the feeding has stopped. Vathra felt sick. The swarm had been the most terrifying threat the galaxy had ever faced. And it had been nothing but a servant of something far worse. When will it arrive? We estimate within the next year. Our sensors have detected its approach. It is moving slowly, but it is coming. And nothing we have can stop it. Nothing? Okonkwo shook her head. The weapons we developed to fight the swarm were powerful. But the silence is not the swarm. It exists partially outside of reality. Normal weapons cannot hurt it. Normal shields cannot stop it. We have been researching ways to fight it, but we have not found anything that works. Then why return now? Why reveal yourselves if you cannot defeat this thing? Okonkwo smiled. For the first time, it was a real smile. Tired and sad, but genuine. Because we have learned something in 20,000 years of war, Counselor. We have learned that we are stronger together than we are alone. Humanity could not defeat the swarm by itself. We needed the Concord's help. The Concord refused, and we almost died. She stepped closer to Vathra. Now the silence is coming, and it is worse than the swarm ever was. If the galaxy faces this threat divided, it will fail. Humanity will die. The Concord will fall. Everything will be consumed by the darkness. But together we have a chance. A small chance, but a chance. Vathra thought about everything she had seen. The memorial hall with its millions of names. The museum with its artifacts of sacrifice. The holographic images of endless war and a dimension of darkness. Humanity had given everything to protect the galaxy that had abandoned them. They had fought alone for 20,000 years. They had lost billions of their own people. And now, when a greater threat appeared, they had returned to stand with their betrayers. It was more than Vathra could comprehend. More than she deserved. More than anyone deserved. But it was real. Humanity had chosen compassion over vengeance. They had chosen unity over division. They had chosen to save the galaxy one more time. I will return to the Concord, Vathra said. I will tell them everything. I will make them understand. Some will not believe you. Then I will show them the evidence. I will bring recordings and data and witnesses. I will make them see the truth. And when they see the truth, what then? Vathra straightened her back. Her old bones ached, but her spirit was stronger than it had been in centuries. Then we will fight together. Human and Kelani. Concord and Terran. All of us, standing as one against the darkness. Okonkwo nodded slowly. That is what we hoped you would say. She extended her hand. It was a human gesture, Vathra knew. A sign of agreement. A promise between equals. Vathra took the hand in her own. The human's grip was warm and strong. Welcome back to the galaxy, Captain, Vathra said. Okonkwo smiled. It is good to be back, Counselor. Now let us get to work. We do not have much time. Outside the Revenant, the human fleet hung silent in space. 500 ships. 20,000 years of experience. And a purpose that burned brighter than any star. They had returned to save the galaxy. And nothing in the universe was going to stop them. The Concord capital world of Ethoria had never seen such chaos. Billions of beings from thousands of species crowded the streets. They watched the massive displays that floated above the cities, showing images that no one had ever expected to see. Human ships, human soldiers, human faces. Humanity had returned. The news had spread across the galaxy in a matter of days. Every world, every station, every ship had received the message. The species that everyone believed was extinct had suddenly appeared with a fleet larger than anything the Concord possessed. And they claimed they had spent 20,000 years fighting a war in a dimension that no one knew existed. Some people celebrated. They saw the return of humanity as a miracle, a second chance, a gift from the universe. Others were afraid. They saw the humans as a threat, strangers who had hidden in the darkness for 20,000 years, building weapons and ships and waiting for the right moment to strike. And some simply could not believe it. They called it a trick, a hoax, an elaborate deception designed to weaken the Concord. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord, the debate raged without end. "This is madness," Admiral Sothron shouted, his scarred face twisted with anger. "We are supposed to believe that humans spent 20,000 years fighting a war in another dimension, that they sacrificed billions of lives to protect us. This is obviously a lie." "It is not a lie." Councillor Vathra stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by holographic displays showing the evidence she had brought from the Revenant. "I saw their memorial halls with my own eyes. I spoke to their captain. I reviewed their historical records. Everything they told us is true. Historical records can be faked. Memories can be implanted. You were manipulated, Counselor. I am 21,000 years old, Admiral. I have dealt with liars and manipulators for longer than most species have existed. I know truth when I see it." The hall erupted in argument. Diplomats shouted at each other. Factions formed and split and reformed. The noise was deafening. K.Y.R. Ian watched from the observation gallery above the main floor. He was not supposed to be there. He was just a patrol officer. He had no right to attend the highest levels Concord government, but Captain Okonkwo had insisted. "You found us," she had told him when the human fleet first appeared. "You were the first to make contact. You should see how your leaders react." So he watched, and what he saw made him sad. The leaders of the galaxy were arguing about whether to trust the people who had saved them. They were debating whether humanity was a friend or an enemy. They were wasting time that they did not have, because the silence between stars was coming, and it would not wait for the Concord to make up its mind. The debate continued for hours. Admiral Sothron led the faction that opposed cooperation with humanity. He argued that the humans were a threat, that they had built their fleet in secret, that they could easily conquer the Concord if they wished. "They surrounded our fleet with 500 warships," he said. "They could have destroyed us all. Why should we trust them?" "Because they did not destroy you," Vathra replied. "They could have attacked at any time in the last 20,000 years. They chose not to. They chose to protect us instead of punishing us." "Protect us from what?" "A threat that only they know about." "How convenient." "The threat is real, Admiral. I have seen the evidence. Evidence that they provided. Evidence that could be fabricated." Another diplomat spoke up. Her name was Moravi, and she represented a species called the Tethrani. They were small creatures with delicate wings and large, curious eyes. "Admiral Sothron raises a valid concern," she said. "But Councillor Vathra has served the Concord faithfully for 20,000 years. Her judgment should not be dismissed so easily." "Her judgment is compromised," Sothron snapped. "She was there when we abandoned humanity. She carries guilt for that decision. She wants to believe that the humans have forgiven us because it would ease her conscience." Vathra's face remained calm, but Karen could see the pain in her eyes. The Admiral's words had struck a nerve. "Perhaps I do carry guilt," she said quietly. "Perhaps I want to believe that we can be redeemed. But my feelings do not change the facts. Humanity has returned. They have a fleet. They have technology we do not understand. And they claim that something terrible is coming." "Claims," Sothron said. "Always claims. Show me proof." "Very well." Vathra touched a control on her console. The holographic displays in the center of the hall changed. They now showed the recordings from the Revenant. Images of the Memorial Hall. Images of the museum. images of the prison dimension where humanity had fought for 20,000 years. The hall fell silent. Everyone watched as the recordings played. They saw the names carved into black stone. They saw the artifacts of sacrifice. They saw the battles in the dimension of darkness, where human soldiers fought endless hordes of swarm creatures. And then they saw the silence between stars. The image appeared on every display. That vast darkness. That terrible, unknowable presence. The thing that existed outside of reality and had created the swarm as its tool. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Admiral Sothron cleared his throat. This could still be a fabrication. Advanced holographic technology could create these images. But his voice had lost its confidence. Even he could feel the wrongness radiating from the image of the silence. It was not just darkness. It was the absence of light. The absence of hope. The absence of everything that made life worth living. That is not a fabrication, Admiral, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Standing at the entrance to the Great Hall was Captain Mira Okonkwo. She had come to the Concord capital on a diplomatic shuttle, and she had waited outside while the debate raged. Now she walked into the hall, her boots echoing on the stone floor. Behind her came two other humans, young soldiers with hard eyes and military bearing. I apologize for the intrusion, Okonkwo said, but I could not wait any longer. You were not invited into this chamber, Sothron said. No, but what I have to say cannot wait for an invitation. She walked to the center of the hall and looked up at the holographic image of the silence between stars. 20,000 years ago, my ancestors made a choice. They chose to fight a war that no one else would fight. They chose to sacrifice everything to protect a galaxy that had abandoned them. Billions of humans died so that you could live. Her voice was calm but carried across the entire hall. I did not come here to ask for gratitude. I did not come here to demand payment. I came here because the galaxy is in danger again. And this time, humanity cannot fight alone. She touched a device on her wrist. The holographic displays changed again. Now they showed data, sensor readings, astronomical charts. The silence between stars is approaching. Our best estimates say it will arrive in this region of space within 10 months. When it arrives, it will begin consuming everything in its path. It will not negotiate. It will not show mercy. It will simply feed. The data was clear. The numbers were precise. There was no room for doubt. We have spent 500 years studying this entity, Okonkwo continued. We have developed weapons that can hurt it. We have designed strategies that might slow it down. But we cannot defeat it alone. The silence is too vast, too powerful, too alien. She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of diplomats from dozens of species. You have a choice to make. You can argue about whether to trust us. You can debate whether our evidence is real. You can waste time pointing fingers and assigning blame. And when the silence arrives, you can die alone, one by one, as your worlds are consumed. Her voice hardened. Or you can choose to fight, together, human and Kelani, Concord and Terran, all the species of the galaxy, standing as one against the darkness. That is the only way to survive. Admiral Sothron stepped forward. And if we choose not to fight, what then? Will you humans conquer us? Force us to obey? Okonkwo looked at him for a long moment. No, Admiral. If you choose not to fight, we will still fight. We will still try to stop the silence. We have been fighting alone for 20,000 years. We know how to do it. We are very good at it. She paused. But we will fail. Without the Concord's resources, without your ships and soldiers and scientists, we cannot win. The silence will destroy us. Then it will destroy you. Then it will consume the galaxy and move on to the next. She turned away from Sothron and addressed the entire hall. I am not asking you to trust us. I am asking you to see the truth. Look at the evidence. Look at our sacrifices. Look at what is coming. And then make your choice. Silence filled the hall. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, slowly, Counselor Vathra stepped forward. I have made my choice, she said. I stand with humanity. She walked across the floor and stood beside Captain Okonkwo. Her old body was frail, but her eyes burned with determination. Another diplomat rose. Then another. Then another. One by one, they walked across the hall and stood with Vathra and Okonkwo. Species that had never agreed on anything before now stood together. Chiron watched from the observation gallery. He felt tears running down his face. He did not know why. He only knew that he was witnessing something he would never forget. In the end, only Admiral Sothron remained standing alone. He looked at the crowd that had gathered around the human captain. He looked at the holographic images of the coming threat. He looked at the evidence of 20,000 years of sacrifice. And then, slowly, he walked across the floor and joined the others. I still do not trust you, he said to Okonkwo. I think you are hiding something. I think there are secrets you have not shared. There are always secrets, Admiral, Okonkwo replied. But my purpose is not a secret. I am here to save the galaxy. Nothing more. Nothing less. Sothron nodded slowly. Then I will fight beside you. But I will be watching. I would expect nothing less. The vote was held an hour later. It was unanimous. The Galactic Concord would ally with the Terran Reclamation Fleet. Together, they would prepare to face the silence between stars. The news spread across the galaxy. For the first time in 20,000 years, humans and aliens would fight side by side. For the first time since the Swarm War, the galaxy was united. Chiron left the observation gallery and found his way to a quiet corridor. He stood by a window and looked out at the stars. You look troubled. He turned. Captain Okonkwo stood behind him, her arms crossed over her chest. I was just thinking, Chiron said, about what happens next. What happens next is simple. We prepare. We train. We build weapons and ships and fortifications. And when the silence arrives, we fight. Will we win? Okonkwo was silent for a moment. I do not know, she said finally. The silence is like nothing we have ever faced. It is older than the galaxy. It has consumed countless civilizations. We may not be able to stop it. Then why fight? Okonkwo smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a determined one. Because that is what we do. Humans do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not stop fighting until the last breath leaves our bodies. And even then, we find a way to keep going. She looked out the window at the stars. My ancestors could have let the swarm win. They could have accepted their fate and died quietly. Instead, they trapped themselves in a dimension of darkness and fought for 20,000 years. They did not know if they would ever escape. They did not know if anyone would remember them. But they fought anyway. She turned back to Chiron. That is humanity's gift. That is what we bring to this alliance. Not just ships and weapons, but the will to keep fighting when all hope seems lost. The stubbornness to refuse defeat, even when defeat seems inevitable. Chiron thought about her words. He thought about the memorial hall on the Revenant, with its millions of names. He thought about the generations of humans who had lived and died in the prison dimension. I want to help, he said. I do not know what I can do. I am just a patrol officer. But I want to fight. Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. You found us, she said. When everyone else ignored the signals, you investigated. You came alone into the unknown because you were curious. That takes courage. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It was a communication node marked with human symbols. "We've been recruiting allies for a long time," she said. "Not governments, individuals. People from different species who showed kindness when others showed fear. People who helped human scouts when we slipped into normal space. People like your grandmother." Kyron's eyes widened. "My grandmother? She sheltered one of our scouts 50 years ago. He was wounded and his ship was damaged. She found him drifting in space and saved his life. She did not know he was human. She just knew he needed help." Kyron remembered his grandmother. She had died when he was young. She had been a kind woman, always helping others. She never told me. She did not know what he was. But we remembered her kindness. We remembered your family. And when you found the Revenant, we knew it was not an accident. She pressed the communication node into his hand. "We call ourselves the Watchers. We are humans and aliens who work together, sharing information, preparing for the day when humanity would return. Now that day has come. We need people like you." Kyron looked at the device in his hand. It was small and cold. "What do you want me to do? Right now?" "Nothing. Watch. Listen. Learn. When the time comes, you will know what to do." She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the corridor. Kyron stood alone by the window, holding the communication node. Outside, the stars burned bright and cold. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, the silence between stars was approaching. It was coming to consume everything, to end all life, to destroy all hope. But the galaxy was not alone anymore. Humanity had returned, and they would not give up without a fight. The silence between stars arrived on a cold morning in the 10th month of the Alliance. Kyn stood on the bridge of the Concorde flagship, the Eternal Dawn, watching the sensor displays with growing horror. The readings made no sense. The instruments showed a mass larger than a planet, moving through space at speeds that should have been impossible. It was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was something beyond understanding, and it was coming directly toward them. The combined fleet waited at the edge of Concorde space. 3,000 ships from 100 different species, arranged in defensive formations designed by human strategists. The Terran Reclamation Fleet flew alongside them. 500 vessels hardened by 20,000 years of war. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Kyn feared it would not be enough. "All hands, prepare for contact," Admiral Sothron's voice echoed through the ship. "Remember your training. Remember your purpose. Today, we fight for everything." On the main view screen, the silence appeared. At first, Kyron thought there was something wrong with the sensors. The screen showed nothing but darkness, a vast, empty void where the stars should have been. It was as if someone had cut a piece out of reality itself. Then the darkness moved. It stretched and twisted, and folded in on itself like a living thing made of shadow. Shapes appeared within it, shapes that hurt to look at, things that could not exist in normal space but existed anyway. And then a voice spoke. It did not come through the communication channels. It came directly into the minds of every being in the fleet. A voice older than planets. A voice colder than the spaces between galaxies. "You were to be consumed. Why do you still exist?" The words carried weight that normal words did not have. Kyron felt them pressing against his consciousness, trying to crush his thoughts into silence. All around him, crew members grabbed their heads and screamed. On the Concorde ships, chaos erupted. Soldiers collapsed. Officers wept. Ancient beings who had faced 1,000 battles fell to their knees in despair. But on the human ships, something different happened. All Terran vessels activate neural shields. Block the transmission. Captain Akonko's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. On every human ship, systems activated. Strange technology hummed to life. And suddenly, the crushing weight of the Silence's voice began to fade. "Concord vessels, follow our lead," Okonkwo broadcast. "Your minds are not prepared for psychic assault. Fall back behind our lines. We will take the forward position." Admiral Sothron's voice came through the communications, strained but controlled. "We will not hide behind you, Captain. This is not hiding, Admiral. This is tactics. The Silence is trying to break our minds before the battle begins. We have defenses against it. You do not. Fall back, protect your crews, and strike when the moment is right." There was a pause. Then Sothron spoke again. "Understood. All Concord vessels, fall back to secondary positions. Human fleet, you have the forward." The fleet reorganized. The human ships moved to the front, forming a wall of dark metal and ancient weapons. Behind them, the Concord vessels gathered their strength. The Silence watched them with eyes that were not eyes. "You cannot resist. You will be consumed like all the others." "We have heard that before," Okonkwo replied. Her voice broadcast on all frequencies. 20,000 years ago, your swarm said the same thing. We are still here." The Silence laughed. It was a sound that made reality tremble. The swarm was a tool, a simple weapon for simple prey. You destroyed the weapon. Now you face the hand that wielded it. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness. They were not swarm creatures. They were something worse. Things made of twisted space and negative light. Things that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Things that had no name because no species had ever survived long enough to name them. Thousands of them. Millions. An endless tide of impossible horrors. Pouring out of the darkness like water from a broken dam. "All human vessels," Okonkwo commanded. "Fire." The human fleet opened fire with weapons the galaxy had never seen. Prometheus lances tore through space, creating wounds in reality that sucked the Silence's creatures into the void. Dimensional bombs exploded, scattering their targets across multiple planes of existence. Coherent thought beams burned through psychic defenses, silencing the voices that whispered of despair. The creatures of the Silence died in their thousands. But more kept coming. Chiron watched the battle unfold on the sensors. The human fleet was holding barely. Their weapons were effective, but the enemy was endless. Every creature they destroyed was replaced by 10 more. "Concord vessels, we need support fire on Sector 7, Okonkwo broadcast. Target the dimensional rifts. Collapse them before more enemies can emerge." "Acknowledged," Sothron replied. "All Concord vessels, concentrate fire on Sector 7. The Concord ships opened fire. Their weapons were not as advanced as the human technology, but they were powerful. Concentrated barrages struck the dimensional rifts, destabilizing them, forcing them closed. For a moment, the tide of enemies slowed down, then the Silence spoke again. "You fight well, but your strength is finite. Mine is not." The darkness expanded. It reached out toward the fleet like a hand reaching for insects. Ships that touched it simply ceased to exist. They did not explode. They did not break apart. They just vanished, as if they had never been. "Evasive maneuvers," Okonkwo shouted. "All vessels, stay clear of the main body." The fleet scattered. Ships dove and twisted, trying to avoid the expanding darkness. Some made it. Some did not. Kyren watched in horror as a human cruiser was caught by the edge of the Silence. For a moment, the ship hung suspended in the void. Then it was gone. 1,000 human lives, erased in an instant. "We cannot keep this up," Admiral Sothron said. "The entity is too large, too powerful. Our weapons are barely slowing it down. We need to strike the core," Okonkwo replied. The silence has a central consciousness, a heart. If we can destroy it, the rest will collapse. Where's the core? At the center of the darkness. We have been studying the entity for 500 years. We know where its vital points are, but reaching them is impossible. Difficult, Okonkwo corrected. Not impossible. There was a long pause. When Okonkwo spoke again, her voice was calm. Too calm. Counselor Vaithra, are you listening? Vaithra's voice came through the communication channel from another ship. She was old and frail, but she had insisted on being present at the battle. I am here, Captain. I need you to take command of the human fleet when I am gone. Chiron felt ice form in his stomach. Captain, Vaithra said slowly, what are you planning? What needs to be done? The Revenant has dimensional drives. They are powerful enough to open a rift into the prison dimension. If we fly into the core of the silence and detonate them there, we can drag the entity into the same prison that holds the swarm. You would be destroyed. Yes. Silence on the communication channel. Then Vaithra spoke again, her voice heavy with grief. There must be another way. There is not. We have studied the silence for centuries. This is the only method that has any chance of success. The Revenant is the only ship powerful enough to create a rift of sufficient size. And someone has to fly it in. Captain Okonkwo, Admiral Sothran said, I have not always agreed with you. I have not always trusted you. But this is beyond sacrifice. This is extinction. Not extinction, Admiral, sacrifice. There is a difference. Okonkwo paused. My crew has volunteered. Every one of them. They know what we are going to do. They know they will not survive. They choose to do it anyway, because that is what humans do. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We fight until the last breath. She took a deep breath. Tell the galaxy what we did here today. Tell them that humanity came back not for revenge, but for hope. Tell them that we chose to stand with those who abandoned us, because that was the right thing to do. Tell them that when the darkness came, we walked into it willingly so that others could live in the light. Chiron felt tears streaming down his face. He was not ashamed of them. Goodbye, Counselor Vaithra, Okonkwo said. Take care of my people. I will, Vaithra whispered. I promise. Goodbye, Patrol Officer Chiron. You found us. You brought us home. Never forget that. I won't, Chiron managed to say. I won't ever forget. Goodbye, Admiral Sothran. Keep fighting. Never stop. Sothran's voice was rough. We will, Captain. I swear it. The Revenant broke formation. The massive black ship, 20 kilometers of ancient metal and human courage, turned toward the center of the silence. Its engines flared with light that seemed to burn brighter than any star. All human vessels. Okonkwo broadcast one final time. Continue the fight. Protect the Concord. Hold the line. Then the Revenant was gone, diving into the darkness at impossible speed. Chiron watched the sensors as the ship penetrated the outer layers of the silence. Enemies swarmed around it, but the Revenant's weapons carved a path through them. The ship was taking damage. Systems were failing. Crew members were dying. But it kept going. She has reached the second layer, a sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. Third layer. Fourth layer. Heavy damage to the hull. Engines at 50%. Fifth layer. Life support failing. Weapons offline. She has reached the core. On the view screen, a small point of light appeared at the very center of the darkness. It was the Revenant, battered and broken, but still flying. Still fighting. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then the point of light exploded. It was not a normal explosion. It was a tear in the fabric of reality itself. A wound in space that opened like a mouth and began to devour everything around it. The silence screamed. It was a sound that echoed across dimensions, a cry of rage and pain and fear. The vast darkness began to twist and convulse. Its creatures dissolved into nothing. Its extensions collapsed. And then, slowly, the silence was pulled into the rift. Chiron watched in awe as the entity that had threatened to consume the galaxy was dragged into the same prison that held the swarm. Piece by piece, layer by layer, the darkness vanished into the dimensional tier. It took hours. The rift kept growing, kept pulling, kept consuming the silence until nothing remained but empty space. And then, finally, the rift closed. The stars returned. For a long moment, the fleet hung silent in space. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply stared at the place where the silence had been. Then, slowly, cheering began. It started on the Concorde ships, spreading from vessel to vessel like fire. Soldiers wept with joy. Officers embraced. Beings who had never celebrated anything in their lives danced in the corridors. But on the human ships, there was only silence. They had won, but they had lost their captain. They had lost the Revenant. They had lost brothers and sisters and friends. Victory had come with a price that could never be repaid. 1 year later, Chiron stood on the surface of Earth. The planet had been reopened to the galaxy for the first time in 20,000 years. Billions of pilgrims from every species had come to see the homeworld of the legendary humans. They walked through the rebuilt cities. They visited the ancient monuments. They paid their respects at memorials that stretched from horizon to horizon. Chiron stood beside Counselor Vaethra at the largest memorial of all. It was a towering structure of black stone, inscribed with the names of every human who had died fighting for the galaxy. At its center was a special section, reserved for the crew of the Revenant. At the very top was the name of Captain Mira Okonkwo. She would have hated this, Vaethra said quietly. All this attention, all this ceremony. She was a soldier, not a symbol. She became both, Chiron replied. He was no longer a patrol officer. He was now a liaison officer between the Terran Reclamation Fleet and the Galactic Concorde. It was a position created just for him. The galaxy has changed because of her. Because of all of them. Has it changed enough? Chiron looked around. He saw humans walking among aliens, laughing and talking as if the last 20,000 years had never happened. He saw children of different species playing together. He saw old wounds beginning to heal. I think so, he said. I hope so. Vaethra nodded slowly. I hope so too. They stood in silence for a while, watching the crowds flow past. Then Vaethra spoke again. Have you heard the rumors? What rumors? Some of the deep space sensors have been picking up strange signals. Faint transmissions from far beyond the galaxy. Transmissions that match old human communication protocols. Chiron's heart skipped a beat. What kind of transmissions? Vaethra smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was hope in it. A voice. A human voice. Saying the same words over and over again. What words? Vaethra looked up at the sky, at the stars that burned bright and cold and eternal. The Revenant endures. Were you still out here, watching? Always. Chiron stared at her. That is impossible. The ship was destroyed. We saw it. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. Humans have a habit of surviving things that should kill them. It is their greatest gift. She turned and began to walk away. Wait, Chiron called after her. What are we going to do about it? Vaethra looked back over her shoulder. What do you think, patrol officer? We are going to find them. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Chiron alone at the memorial. He looked up at the name carved at the top of the stone. Captain Mira Okonkwo, Hero, savior, legend, and maybe, just maybe, survivor. Chiron smiled. Somewhere out there, beyond the edges of the known galaxy, the Revenant endured. Captain Okonkwo endured. Humanity endured. And they were watching, always watching, waiting for the day when the galaxy would need them again. Because that was what humans did. They never gave up. They never stopped fighting. And they never, ever disappeared. Not really. Not forever. Above the memorial, the sun set over Earth. The sky turned red and gold and purple. Colors that humans had watched for millions of years. Colors that reminded them of home. Colors that reminded them why they fought. The stars came out one by one, filling the darkness with light. And somewhere among them, far beyond the reach of any sensor, a ghost ship drifted through the void, waiting, watching, forever.